Believe it or not, during my 25 years as a bladesmith, I've actually never won an award. In fact, I've never really even tried. Today, that all changes as I give it my very best to win my very first knife award.
Today I'm here at the grandfather of modern American bladesmithing, Bill Moran's home shop. And you may be asking yourself, why are you here, Matt? Well, that's because in this video, I'm going to do my absolute best to make a knife worthy of the Bill Moran Award that's given away by the American Bladesmith Society each and every year at Blade Show Atlanta.
Ever since I found out that this Bill Moran Award existed, I knew that I wanted to go for it at some point in my career. Winning this award, or at least trying to win it, would really mean a lot to me, so I really wanted to wait till my skills as a knife maker had developed up to the level of previous winners. But waiting around gets you nowhere fast, and even though I've never done a lot of the processes needed to make a Bill Moran style knife such as silver inlay, I believe the sign of a true craftsman is learning new processes on the fly right in the middle of a project. And since Bill Moran reintroduced Damascus into the modern world in the 70s, I knew that I was going to have to make my knife out of Damascus.
Now you guys are going to see me referencing this book, William F. Moran Jr. Forever a Legend, a lot in this video, and that's because it's full of pieces that Bill Moran has made.
And one of my main goals is to take a blend of a ton of his knives and put them together as one, as if we were doing a collaboration together, and having all of these references in one book is just awesome. Now during this project, one of the things I'm going to try to do my best is to keep as faithful as possible to traditional Bill Moran techniques and materials. But one of the things I'm not going to do is use the materials he used in his Damascus blades, which more often than not were pure iron and high carbon steel. Today's modern steels are much better and show a much higher contrast and will hold a much better edge than something like iron. So that's just one of those things where I feel like it deserves a little bit of an upgrade to modern time standards. After carefully studying a lot of Damascus blades that Moran made in this book, I've come to figure out that my target goal for layer count is around 300. So I'm going to cut and fold and restack until I hit that goal. I'm now starting on the preform for our knife. I still have to do all the ladder patterning up at the front, but I'm starting to isolate that material that will become the integral bolster. When looking at a lot of the Bowie knives that Bill Moran made, I saw one really unique thing, and that is that when he did an integral knife, he more often than not would put a guard behind it. Most people these days just butt up a wood handle to their integral bolster, but he actually did a guard, and I thought that was really cool, so that's why I chose to do that on my piece as well. With the ladder pattern now carved into the billet, it's time to go back to the power hammer to forge it out flat into our knife blade.
This right here is a little giant power hammer. This is the power hammer here in Bill Moran's shop that he used to make Damascus and all sorts of things. And since I have a little giant power hammer in my shop, I'd be remiss if I didn't use it for at least a little bit of this blade forging.
As I'm using a top tool to isolate that integral bolster even more, you might notice that there's a lot more material here than I need. And that's basically because I wanted to make a billet large enough to make 2 knives just in case something went wrong. I don't think anything is going to go wrong, but honestly, you never know, so why not make twice as much material as you need? It's about the same work to create a bigger billet as it is a smaller one.
Even though I meticulously counted the layers in the book of Moran style Damascus blades, I had a little bit of a brain fart. I didn't take into fact that I was going to be removing a bunch of material when I did the ladder pattern, which would make it look like a much lower layer count. So when I did the initial etch test on this first blade, it's just too bold of layers, doesn't look like Moran's work. So we're going to go back real quick, take that extra piece of Damascus I mentioned before, and go ahead, fold that a couple times and get our layer count up and make another blade. This blade that I started with is still great, I'll use it for something, but I don't think it's right for this project.
So basically I'm folding the billet 3 more times to increase the layer count, and then basically going through all the same steps you just saw previously. Laddering, forging, all of that. Then we'll be back to where we need to be. Alright, now that we have blade number 2 back to where we were on the first one, it's time to get it heat treated. I took 2 2x4s and carved out the area where that integral bolster would be, so that when I clamp them together to keep this straight after the quench, it has a nice recess and everything fits in there nice and straight. Some people like to give me a lot of crap about not using my kiln for the heat treat. I do sometimes I don't. This blade is made out of 15 and 20 and 80 CRV. I've worked with those materials for many, many years, and I understand what temperatures look like and how they should be heat treated. So I'm comfortable with it. If you're not, don't do it how I do it. This is my knife though, so that's how it goes. With the heat treat now done, it's time to move on to doing the final grinding on this blade. Now, Bill Moran's Bowie knives, more often than not, are a lot more like a modern kitchen knife. Really drastic taper and very, very sharp. You might notice that the shape of my integral bolster is pretty unique, and that's because I have something pretty special planned. Really, at this point though, all I gotta do is be really careful to make sure I don't grind into it while I grind the actual blade. Since I am adding a guard to this integral bolster, it's really important that it's super flat. It's not just a soft piece of wood that I can jam on there and make work. So I'm going to use a file guide and get it really, really close on the grinder, and then do a little bit of finagling by hand to make sure that that area is really, really flat. So not only is Moran known for these integral bolsters, but he's known for these carved clamshell integral bolsters. And I love clamshells, so I'm up for the challenge. Looking through dozens and dozens of his knives that have this clamshell, I never saw him do one in a pattern welded or Damascus blade. So I think that's pretty cool that I'm incorporating that into this piece. And I think I'm gonna go a little crazier and try to do something clamshell-esque with the wood handle a little later.
On a lot of his knives, especially his Bowie knives, Bill used German silver for his guards and his butt plates. Well, I don't have any of that, but what I do have is a piece of iron that I bought here at the Moran Museum many, many years ago that was supposed to be wrought iron or iron that Bill actually used and was leftover stock here in his shop. So I think if I can't get my hands on any German silver, at least I can use a piece of Moran's own iron. Just another little bit of that extra credit that I love to slip into these historical builds.
For the guard shape, I decided to go with one of Moran's classic heart pierced designs. I'm going to do a few things a little different though, like I'm tapering out these little coins. I think that gives it a little better look. Still going to have the heart and soul of Moran's original design, just with some of my personal flavor mixed in. And right here on the central block portion, I'm going to do some file work that I found that he did a lot of times on his dagger guards. I think that'll really add a lot to it. But first, let's pierce these hearts. Remember, I'm not trying to copy an exact design of Bill Moran's. I know some past award winners have gone that direction, and there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, I rather think of it as a collaboration and take a bunch of his designs, some of my style, and mix them all into one knife. I feel like if I win an award for that, then I've truly accomplished something instead of just copying a piece that's already previously existed.
Bill Moran was known for using tiger stripe or curly maple for the vast majority of his handles, which more often than not incorporated some sort of carving and or some silver inlay. And if you know me, I like to go a little nerdy with these historical builds. And even though it's fairly recent history, this is still treated like a historical build to me because Bill Moran made knives in the early American style. So what I've done is a little extra credit.
So the story behind the piece of wood that I've actually selected is that I've got it many years ago at the Antique Arms Show in Baltimore. There is a fella from Virginia that sells custom curly maple rifle stocks, and he always has some smaller cut off pieces that I usually look through. Well, this year that I went, he finally asked me what I did for a living. I told him I made swords and knives, and he said, "Oh, that's really interesting. You know, Bill Moran used to come down and buy his wood from my father many years ago. Do you know who Bill Moran is?" I said, "Of course I do." So it's very likely that this piece of wood is a piece of wood that Bill Moran would have actually selected from the same supplier and purchased if he was still making knives today. And to me, I think that's pretty cool. I said before, not only do I want to incorporate the clamshell on the integral bolster, but on the handle side as well, and Bill Moran is really known for doing that. However, I've only ever seen him do it on his kind of rounded handles. I've never seen him try to do it on a coffin shaped handle, so therein lies a real challenge for how I'm going to incorporate that into this coffin shaped handle. A lot of figuring out to do, so for now I'm just going to move on to doing some hand sanding to finish out this blade. For whatever reason, I'm not really sure why, I always do the back bevel or the false edge absolutely last after I've done my hand sanding. I don't know why, but that's how I do it. Another thing that Moran incorporated into a lot of his knives is the Spanish choil, or the Spanish notch, which is basically some filework on the back of the heel of the blade. Adds a lot of flair, so I'm certainly not going to miss this opportunity to add a little extra decoration to my blade. To polish out these notches, I'm using an old silversmithing technique that Ilya showed me. This is a pretty cool trick that was shown to him by another silversmith. This is a rather simple but awesome trick where you take some sandpaper, clamp it into your piercing saw, and that allows the flexibility to get in some really tight grooves. Definitely give that a try. Alright, with the vast majority of the metalwork done, it's time to stop delaying the work that has to be done on this wood handle. I've been putting it off for a while now because, well, I'm a little intimidated because I've never done this silver inlay, and there's going to have to be some carving after I inlay, so there's a lot of potential to really mess up many hours of work. But honestly, this kind of came natural to me. Use this little tiny miniature flat screwdriver looking tool, push in some grooves, scuff up your silver wire, and basically push them into those grooves. There's a lot more to it, and it does take some practice, but I was pretty happy with how quick I picked this technique up. Big shout out to my friend Aaron Ayler, who's a talented knife maker and blacksmith and artist in general, who really lent me his time and actually lent me his tools to be able to do this process. So appreciate you, Aaron. Thank you. I love just being able to share the craft with other people, and trust me, a lot of really talented smiths out there have shared the craft with me, and that's how I've got where I am, and I hope to help others progress just like they have with me. After my inlay is complete, I add a little bit of water to the actual soft maple wood. This swells it up and actually hugs that silver and locks it into place nice and tight. I have to say I'm really sorry. I forgot to record the carving of the clamshell. Basically, I was really nervous and I forgot to hit the record button, but I did carve that. Basically, I had to remove material all the way from the clamshell to the butt cap side of the handle. Speaking of butt cap, we got to make one. And I have a little left over of that iron that I made the guard from. So let's go ahead and get a hole drilled in that and sculpt that thing up to form fit the handle perfectly. Now the very last thing I have to do, other than go to Atlanta and try to win the award itself, is to make a pommel nut. One can't just have a simple nut bought from a hardware store, so I moved to the lathe and start removing some material to create it. This doesn't look like much, but trust me, after we go to the grinder, do a little file work, it'll be primo. When tapping a shallow piece of material like this, but you actually need the threads as deep as possible, you're gonna have to use two different taps. One to start it, that's tapered like this one, and then one that's flat on bottom that allows you to get even deeper, that's called a bottoming tap. Believe it or not, up until this point, I actually haven't etched this blade to see what it looks like at all. I've been able to see the pattern pretty blatantly through the polish. So it's really pretty awesome getting to see it for the first time after a couple weeks worth of work. Going for the Bill Moran Award is something I highly suggest every journeyman smith to do, especially if you do it in between the years of going for your JS and your Master Smith certification. The reason being is it gets you in the mindset of looking at other people's work and coming up with your own unique designs. Not only that, but you're also honoring a legend, the man who created the American Bladesmith Society, Bill Moran. Making this knife was more about the process, not about actually winning the award, but I am very, very proud to say that I did win the award, and it was presented to me at Blade Show, and it was really nice to have Jay Hendricks in there. He was my mentor for my JS testing, and he said one of the best things that anyone could ever say to me, and that is that Bill Moran would have really loved my knife. It truly doesn't get much better than that. Be sure to check out our sponsor, War Thunder, by using the link in the description. And if you thought this video was awesome, then you have to see this one right here.